Hello, this is Super Life Coach with your friend Anne. Today I want us to look at the issue on guilt. Guilt is one of those emotions that drains somebody so much. And when somebody is struggling with guilt, they are dying on the inside and nobody can rescue them because the battle is going on within them. So let me ask this. What are you guilty of? If you can write this statement, I often feel guilty about, and then you feel it. Fill that gap. I often feel guilty about, write whatever it is. Now, because those are things that are very close to us, you don't need so much time to think. That is something that is right there. It keeps on popping up even when you don't want it to pop up. So it is not difficult to identify what you often feel guilty about. So let's look at how do we get ourselves free from guilt. The first thing I would want you to know is that you cannot live your life with guilt, because guilt will drain you. When you entertain guilt, before you know it, you will begin to feel self-condemnation coming in. Self-accusation will begin coming in. You might even develop self-hate. Shame will follow in there. Feelings of unworthiness, even failure. So guilt is one thing you cannot live your life with. Now, there are some two types of guilt. The first one is called legitimate guilt. The second one is called false guilt. What is legitimate guilt? This is guilt that comes when you do something that you knew you shouldn't do or you shouldn't have done. It is a guilt that comes in because you knew you should have done something and you did not do. And this is something that was within your ability to do. These are circumstances that you could control. You were supposed to take responsibility, but you didn't. And that makes you guilty. You were not supposed to do it, but you did it anyhow, and it makes you feel guilty. So even though it is legitimate guilt, you cannot live with it. It will drain you. It will destroy you with the things I've just mentioned. The second guilt, which is called false guilt, this is a type of a guilt that comes upon you over things that you are not responsible for. It is brought about by something we call false responsibility. You're feeling guilty over something that happened. It wasn't your responsibility. And if it was beyond your control. There was nothing you could have done about it. So you did not fail to do it just because you didn't want to. You failed to do it because it was beyond your ability to do. It may have been directly under your responsibility, but there was nothing you could do about it. Another false guilt comes in from false responsibility, where you're taking responsibility over things you are not responsible for. So check what you have written and ask yourself, is this guilt legitimate or not? Is this something that I am directly responsible for, so I am legitimately guilty? Or is it something that is not my responsibility, or even if it was, there was nothing I could have done about it, which is then false guilt. So if yours is legitimate guilt, I said you cannot live with it. Is yours is a false guilt, again, you cannot live with it. So what do I do if mine is legitimate guilt? There are several things you can do to get rid of it. Step number 1 is what we call making amends. Is it possible to mend it? Is there anything right now you can do to correct the situation? If there is something you can do, then do it. The second thing you can do is, if there is nothing you can do to mend the situation, then is it possible to ask for forgiveness? For example, if the guilt is towards others, something you did and others are not happy with you, and you're guilty, legitimately guilty, because they are angry with you, disappointed with you because of what you did or you did not do. So is it possible then to approach them and ask them to forgive you? If it is not possible to go to them, because you could be guilty of murder, you killed somebody, you cannot go back to them and ask them to forgive you. Step number 3, then ask for forgiveness from God. And somebody might say, I have asked for forgiveness from God for so many years and I still feel guilty. Then the step number 4 is forgive yourself and move on. If you continue beating yourself, you have only yourself to blame. If, for example, the others have forgiven you, for example, you asked them for forgiveness and they forgave you, and you still feel guilty, you have asked God for forgiveness and you still feel guilty, then it simply means you have not forgiven yourself. Sometimes we are unable to forgive ourselves because of pride. You cannot believe that you did it. You have so high standards for yourself. It is not bad to set high standards for yourself, but in so doing, remember, you can fail. You're human. So pride can keep somebody beating themselves over and over and over. Another thing that can cause somebody to beat themselves over and over is self-pity. So do not entertain any of the two, because they will drain you, they will kill you. Put down your pride, admit to yourself that you failed and you failed others. Admit to yourself that you're human and you can fail. Admit to yourself that You can only move forward if you let go of yourself. So if God has forgiven you and others have forgiven you, why can't you then just forgive yourself? Forgiving yourself doesn't mean that you are assuming the wrong that you did, or you're just letting yourself off the hook. No. You're simply acknowledging that I am human, I can fail, and I'm ready to learn this lesson of loving myself so that I stop beating myself. So forgive yourself and move on. So those are the 4 things you can do with legitimate guilt. How about false guilt? Some people love to take responsibility over things they are not responsible for several reasons. One, they are seeking approval. They are people pleasers. They don't want the other person to feel guilty over what they did. They want to take that as their responsibility. It's like they're the ones who were on the wrong, and they know surely deep inside they were not. They are looking for mistakes in themselves, and they do that because they have low self-esteem. They think they are always wrong. That if something is wrong, it must be their fault. So when something goes wrong, they quickly blame themselves. All they need is approval. They want to fit in. They have the savior mentality. They wish they can save and rescue everybody so that they look good. So they carry with them a false identity. So with the false identity, they will keep carrying false guilt. They pick people's messes, making them their own. So what you need to do is acknowledge that you were not responsible for that. Learn to take responsibility over those things that you're responsible for. And don't lie to yourself, because you know deep inside you were not the one at fault. And taking responsibility to be heroic or whatever it is, you're hurting yourself. So reject the false guilt. Reject it and move on. You can go to superlifecoach.co.ke. There is a prayer that I have put when you are dealing with a stronghold of escape. So that prayer, you can use it to demolish false guilt. Acknowledge that you have given place to false guilt and command it to leave. Break away from false guilt. So I hope you will do this. It is important. Do not walk around with false guilt. Do not walk around with legitimate guilt. In other words, do not entertain any kind of guilt. Do what you need to do to free yourself from guilt. Thank you so much. Till next time.